Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. I'll give you my salary if you can translate this. Alexander Thompson's voice thundered across the meeting room. The directors at Thomson Worldwide looked at each other. Startled, one let out a nervous laugh. Another adjusted his tie, but no one dared challenge the boss. On the large mahogany table was the cause of the chaos. An envelope from Spain containing a document in Basque, deadlines, stamps, official seals. Everything suggested it was urgent. The clock on the wall read 4:05 p.m. Alexander held the paper up, his face red with frustration. $150,000. That's what I earn a month. If anyone here can translate this thing right now, I'll write a check on the spot. He paused for dramatic effect and added sarcastically, "Maybe you, Michael, or will you need to ask Google Translate for help?" Nervous chuckles circled the table. Michael, head of marketing, coughed to hide his embarrassment. "Sir, our translators have already tried." The head of operations began. "Tried?" Alexander scoffed. "Tell me, did they try or just look at it and pretend it was Chinese? Honestly, I've seen my dog bark with more confidence." More laughter, slightly freer now, but still uneasy. Everyone knew Thompson loved to humiliate people. It was part of his personal act. No one actually believed he would give away his own salary. Everyone except one person. In the corner, almost invisible, a young woman was bent over a glass shelf, quietly dusting. Plain cleaning uniform, worn-out gloves, hair tied back in a hurry. This was Elena Ramirez. She stopped, straightened up, and to everyone's surprise, spoke in a steady voice. "I can translate it." Silence fell like a bomb. Some of the directors laughed out loud. Others covered their mouths to hide their smirks. Alexander raised his eyebrows, surprised. "You?" He let out a short laugh. "The cleaning lady. What's next? Are you going to pull a basket dictionary out of your pocket along with your feather duster?" More laughter. Elena, however, didn't smile. She walked up to the table, ignoring the looks full of judgment. She picked up the document calmly like it was just any sheet of paper. She held it up to the light, took a deep breath, and began to read in a clear voice. "Mr. Alexander Thompson is the sole heir of Sofia Mendoza, who passed away in Bilbao, Spain. The will requires his signature and the return of the original document by 5 today." The laughter stopped. Alexander blinked, stunned. "You're making that up." He let out a nervous laugh. "Next thing you know, you'll be reciting a paella recipe, right?" But Elena kept going, unfazed. "Otherwise, the entire inheritance will be turned over to the state." A murmur ran through the room. One director whispered, "Oh my God." Another cleared his throat, trying to hide his anxiety. Alexander's sarcastic smile disappeared. He grabbed his phone and called the Spanish consulate in New York. Putting it on speaker, "I need immediate confirmation of a Basque document," he said quickly. A calm voice replied, "Mr. Thompson, yes. The deadline is today at 5 p.m. If you don't send it, you lose the right to the inheritance." Alexander froze. He looked at his watch. 50 minutes left. "Go on," he said now. "Serious." Elena translated every line with perfect accuracy. No hesitation, no pause. She handed over the full document, ready to be signed. Alexander scribbled his signature quickly as an assistant ran to arrange an urgent delivery. The room stayed silent. All eyes were on her. Alexander took a deep breath and finally said, "Thank you. I'll pay you for the service." Elena lifted her chin slightly, gave a small smile, and replied, "Oh, of course. That would be the $150,000 from your monthly salary you promised if someone translated it right, sir." The shock ran through the room like electricity. A few executives coughed, others choked on their coffee. Alexander turned pale. "You're kidding," he muttered, stunned. Elena didn't blink. "I don't joke about promises." The tension was thick in the air. The arrogant billionaire used to mocking everyone was now speechless before the woman who had just cornered him. He took a deep breath and in front of everyone gave a slow nod. That's when everything changed. The arrogant king of the skyscraper had just discovered the invisible cleaning lady was nothing like he imagined, and Elena Ramirez knew that salary bet wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The next morning, Alexander couldn't stop thinking about the woman who had, though he wouldn't admit it, turned his arrogance into a check for $150,000. When he got to the office, he found her cleaning the hallway windows, softly whistling a tune he didn't recognize, as if bringing billionaires to their knees was just another day at work. "Elena," he called, trying to sound casual and failing miserably. She stopped wiping the glass and looked at him with those eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Good morning, boss. Here to check if I'm stealing cleaning supplies?" The sarcasm in her voice threw him off. "Actually, I came to make you an offer. How about working here as a freelance interpreter?" Elena dropped the cloth and crossed her arms, tilting her head like someone checking for a hidden trick. "Let me get this straight. Yesterday, I was the invisible cleaning lady. Today, I'm a language consultant. That's an interesting shift in perspective. You showed real language skills." "Showed?" She laughed. "Alexander, I saved your inheritance and your wounded pride. That's not talent. That's basic competence." He swallowed hard. No one had ever spoken to him like that. "So, do you accept?" Elena studied him for what felt like forever. "I accept, but under one very clear condition." "What is it?" "No humiliation and no backpats." Alexander frowned, clearly confused. "Backpats? You know, that whole 'well done, young lady' or 'look at you speaking like a real person.' If anyone does that, I walk out and take my competence with me." "Deal," he said, extending his hand. "Welcome to the team." Elena shook his hand firmly but without the slightest sign of enthusiasm. "See you Monday at 9 sharp." "And Alexander?" "Yes. Don't get used to this. I'm not the kind of person who's impressed by fancy offices." Monday came faster than Alexander expected. Elena showed up right at 9, wearing a simple blouse and perfectly neat jeans. Nothing flashy, but something about her demeanor was different, like she finally belonged in that setting. The executives watched her with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. After all, just 3 days ago she was cleaning their desks. Now she was sitting among them as an equal. Michael, always trying to break ice that wasn't there, approached with his brightest corporate smile. "Elena, welcome to our translation team. You'll be working with our specialists." "Perfect," she said, taking a seat beside Victoria, the head translator, who looked like she'd just bitten into a lemon. Victoria slid a French contract across the table as delicately as if handing her a bomb. "This document needs urgent review before lunch." Elena picked it up, glanced at it, and immediately pointed to a line. "Here, it says, nouveau acceptant terms, but it should be nouveau acceptant terms. The difference is, you're agreeing to any terms instead of these specific terms. In court, that could cost you millions." Victoria's face went from pale to red in seconds. "Well, sometimes the details." "And here," Elena went on, unbothered, "depart has an extra It's depart." Lucas, the senior translator, cleared his throat nervously, trying to salvage some dignity. "French isn't really my strong suit. I specialize in Spanish." Elena casually picked up another document, like someone choosing fruit at the market. "El precio está anotado," she read aloud. "Where's the accent on está? Without it, you're saying the price just exists somewhere instead of being set." Imagine explaining that to an angry Spanish judge. The silence that followed was so awkward, even the air conditioner seemed to stop working. Victoria made a desperate attempt to defend herself. "Those are just small details." Elena looked at her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Victoria, in legal translation, there's no such thing as small details. There are valid contracts and million-dollar lawsuits." Michael popped in like a corporate superhero trying to save the day. "Wow, Elena, that's impressive knowledge. Where did you study all this?" Elena's smile turned sharp. "Life University, Michael's survival campus, master's degree in necessity." While Elena was turning the translation department upside down, Alexander couldn't focus on anything. His curiosity about her was driving him crazy. Eventually, he called Harrison, his personal assistant. "I want a full report on Elena Ramirez, where she lives, who she lives with, work history, everything." Harrison hesitated. "Sir, isn't that a little invasive?" Alexander gave him a cold look. "Harrison, do you like your salary? Then do what I asked." 2 hours later, Harrison returned with a folder that was far too thin to represent an entire life. "Sir, she lives in Brooklyn. Small house, modest neighborhood. She lives with her son Liam, who's 7 years old. There's no record of a husband or current partner." Alexander flipped through the few documents, and the child's father disappeared during the pregnancy. She's been raising the boy on her own ever since. Anything else? Harrison lowered his voice as if he were sharing a state secret. The boy is autistic, sir. The medication and therapy cost a fortune. She worked several jobs to cover it all. Alexander felt something unusual tighten in his chest, a strange feeling that made him uncomfortable. During lunch, he tried to approach Elena in the cafeteria. She was sitting alone, eating a sandwich she had clearly brought from home. Mind if I sit? She looked up, showing no enthusiasm. It's a free table in a free country. He sat down, trying to appear relaxed and failing miserably. So, do you have family? I do. Kids? I do. How old, Alexander? She interrupted, calmly, chewing. We're not friends. We're co-workers. If you want to talk about small talk, there are people who get paid for that. They're called therapists. He was speechless. No one had ever cut him off so elegantly. That same night, Alexander made the transfer of $150,000, wondering what Elena would do with so much money. Buy expensive clothes, travel, invest in the stock market. A week later, Harrison showed up with unsolicited updates. Sir, she completely renovated the house, painted, replaced furniture, installed special equipment for the boy, and hired a well-known private therapist. How do you know all this? The neighbors are very talkative, sir. Alexander smiled for the first time in days. At least she had used the money wisely. The next day, Elena showed up looking noticeably different. New but simple clothes, a fresh haircut, and a renewed energy that gave her a quiet glow. Good morning, Elena, Alexander greeted, trying not to seem like a stalker. Good morning, she replied, walking to her desk without slowing down. He followed her like a lost puppy. Was the money helpful? Elena stopped abruptly and turned to face him. For a moment, Alexander saw something different in her eyes. Gratitude, relief. It was, thank you. You're welcome. If you need anything else, I won't. She cut him off, but this time without harshness. Alexander, I pay my own bills. And she walked to her desk, leaving him standing in the hallway, more fascinated than ever by the woman who had turned his life into an emotional roller coaster. The billionaire CEO had finally met someone who wasn't impressed by his money, and it was driving him completely crazy. Alexander was officially obsessed. It wasn't just professional curiosity, it was something that gnawed at his mind like a mosquito you can hear but can never quite find. Elena Ramirez had become the most fascinating mystery he'd ever encountered, and it was making him lose his mind. On her third week, working as an interpreter, he decided he needed answers. The problem was, Elena had the supernatural ability to shut down any attempt at small talk with surgical precision. His first try happened at the coffee machine. So, Elena, he began, pretending to be casual as he stirred unnecessary sugar into his coffee. Have you always worked with languages? She didn't even lift her eyes from her cup. I work with whatever comes my way. But you have a degree, right? College, maybe a master's. I have a degree in life, Alexander. It's cheaper and way more effective. He tried to laugh, but it came out awkward. Oh, you're funny. But really, where did you learn so many languages? Elena finally looked at him with that gaze that seemed to see right through him. Why the sudden curiosity? Planning to write my biography? No, it's impressive. What's impressive is that you think you need to understand everyone's life to feel important. And she walked away, leaving Alexander standing by the coffee machine, holding a cup and his wounded pride. The second try was even worse. Harrison had found out Elena visited the public library every Wednesday, so Alexander decided to drop by for a casual visit. He found her in the linguistics section, flipping through a book about Basque dialects. Perfect. A natural opening for conversation. What a coincidence, he said much too loudly for a library. Several people shushed him. Elena looked up slowly, like someone identifying a particularly annoying noise. Coincidence? She repeated, closing the book. Do you go to public libraries regularly, Alexander? Sure, I love books and knowledge, things like that. I see. And what was the last book you read? Alexander panicked. The last book he had touched was a financial report. Well, recently I read one about economics. Title, Money and Things. Elena closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Alexander, are you following me? No. I just wanted to find a book about the Basque to better understand that document from the other day. That document was resolved 3 weeks ago. Yeah, but you know how it is. You can never have too much knowledge. She stood up, grabbed 3 books from the shelf, and handed them to him. Basic Basque Grammar, History of the Basque People, and Basque English Dictionary. If you really want to learn, start with these. Enjoy your reading. And she walked out, leaving Alexander alone, with 3 books that might as well have been written in hieroglyphics. His third attempt came during lunch. Alexander decided to try a more subtle approach. Sit at the next table and accidentally overhear conversations. The problem was that Elena always ate alone and in complete silence, so he did the unthinkable. He asked Harrison to dig deeper. "Sir, I found some interesting things," Harrison reported 2 days later. "Elena Ramirez has a master's degree in applied linguistics from Columbia University, top marks in every subject." Alexander nearly choked on his coffee. "Columbia. That's one of the best schools in the country. There's more, sir. She worked as an official translator at the Spanish consulate for 3 years. After that, she was hired by Westbridge Global as Director of International Communications. Westbridge, the consulting firm that collapsed in that corruption scandal." "Exactly. And here's the interesting part. Elena left the company 2 weeks before the scandal broke. There's no record of any formal job since then." Alexander sat quietly trying to process the information. A woman with that resume working as a janitor. It didn't make sense. The next day he decided to try a direct approach. He found Elena organizing documents in the translation room. "Elena, can I ask you something?" "You can ask. Doesn't mean I'll answer." "Why were you working as a cleaner? With your education, you could be working anywhere." For the first time, Elena completely stopped what she was doing. Alexander saw something flash in her eyes. Pain, anger, fear. "Who said I have a degree?" "I found out some things." "Found out?" Her tone turned icy. "You investigated my life?" Alexander realized he had stepped on a landmine. "It wasn't personal. It's just that—" "Alexander," she cut him off, her voice dangerously calm. "You have 3 seconds to explain why you think you have the right to dig into my private life." "I was just curious. You're clearly brilliant. You speak several languages. You understand international law. It doesn't make sense that you're mopping floors." "And why doesn't it make sense?" Because you're what? Too smart to clean floors? Too intelligent for manual labor?" Alexander realized he was digging his own grave. "That's not it. It's just that you have so much potential." Elena laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You know what your problem is, Alexander? You think you can understand people just by looking at them. You want to fit everyone into neat little boxes. I don't. Let me explain something to you. Sometimes life doesn't go as planned. Sometimes you take whatever job you can get. And sometimes—" She stepped closer, eyes shining. "Sometimes you choose to be invisible because it's safer." "Safer how?" But Elena had already stepped away back to the documents, as if the conversation never happened. "Elena, please." "Alexander," she said without looking up, "stop trying to figure me out like I'm a puzzle. Some people have stories they'd rather keep to themselves." He stood there watching her work. There was something in the way her shoulders tensed that told him more than any investigation ever could. Elena Ramirez wasn't just hiding her past, she was protecting herself from something. And for the first time since he met her, Alexander Thompson felt something entirely new, the genuine urge to protect someone instead of simply possessing or controlling them. Maybe it was time to stop seeing Elena as a mystery to be solved and start seeing her as someone who deserved respect. But being Alexander, that realization only made him even more fascinated. The woman who had entered his life by translating a Basque document was turning out to be far more complex than he ever imagined, and the more she avoided him, the more he wanted to know who she really was. The problem was that Elena Ramirez clearly wasn't interested in being understood, at least not by him. Alexander had spent 3 whole days rehearsing the invitation, 3 full days practicing in front of the mirror, trying to sound casual while inviting a woman who treated him like an especially persistent mosquito. On Friday, he finally worked up the nerve. Elena was reviewing contracts when he walked up, adjusting his tie nervously. "Elena, how about dinner? As a professional, thank you for your excellent work." She looked up slowly like she was evaluating a suspicious offer. "A professional, thank you." "Exactly. Nothing personal. Just a way to show appreciation for my what, Alexander? For your outstanding professionalism. Elena laughed, and this time it wasn't her usual cold laugh. All right, I'll accept, but on conditions. Alexander's heart skipped a beat. She had said yes. He managed to contain his excitement and asked, "What conditions?" "First, I choose my outfit. Second, no fancy places. Third, we split the bill. But Elena, it's a thank you. Fourth," she went on firm, "if you say anything condescending, I'll walk out in the middle of dinner and leave you talking to yourself." Alexander swallowed hard. Deal. On Saturday night, Alexander stood outside Le Bernardin in Manhattan, adjusting his Italian suit for the 10th time. He had chosen the fanciest place he knew. After all, Elena deserved the best, even if she had asked for something simple. When he saw her getting out of the taxi, he almost choked. Elena wore a simple navy blue blouse, dark jeans, and comfortable flats. No high heels, heavy makeup, or formal dress. She looked perfect and completely out of place at Le Bernardin. "Hi," she greeted, looking at the restaurant's front. "Seriously, Alexander, what? It's a great restaurant. This place costs more than my monthly rent. But you deserve." Elena cut him off with that sharp look. "Condition number 4. I said, no fancy places, but the reservation's already made. Then, let's get this over with." The maitre d' welcomed them with a smile that faded as soon as he saw Elena. His eyes went over her outfit from head to toe, and Alexander saw the exact moment he judged her as unsuitable. "Good evening, Mr. Thompson," the maitre d' greeted, completely ignoring Elena. "Your table is ready." They were led through the main dining room where other guests were dressed in formal wear. Alexander noticed the curious, judgmental looks aimed at Elena. She, however, walked with her head held high like she owned the place. Their waiter was even worse. He directed every question to Alexander, as if Elena were just decoration. "Would you like to see our wine list, sir?" "Ask her to," Alexander said, pointing to Elena. The waiter looked at her with visible discomfort. "Ma'am, do you drink wine?" Elena smiled sweetly. "No, I drink rocket fuel." "Of course, I drink wine, dear." The waiter blushed, but kept speaking only to Alexander. When Elena ordered the grilled salmon, he wrote it down like she had asked for something absurdly complicated. "Grilled salmon," he muttered, like it was a personal insult to French cuisine. Things got worse when dessert arrived. At the next table, 2 middle-aged women, clearly drunk on champagne and self-importance, started commenting loudly. "Look at that," said the first, wearing a diamond earring bigger than some small countries. "How interesting." "What?" asked the second, following her friend's gaze. "That man, Alexander Thompson, the Billionaire CEO. He's with a companion." Elena stopped eating. Alexander saw her shoulders tense up. "Companion," the second woman whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Wow, how awkward. In a place like this, he's probably going through a midlife crisis." The first one went on. "You know how rich men are always looking for different experiences." Alexander saw Elena's face harden. She dropped her fork and started to get up, but he moved faster. He stood up abruptly, making the chair scrape the floor with a sound that caught the whole restaurant's attention. He walked straight to the women's table with firm steps. "Excuse me," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Were you talking about my companion?" The 2 women turned pale. "We weren't." "Because if you are," Alexander continued, his voice carrying an authority that made silence spread across the room, "let me make one thing clear. That woman over there is Elena Ramirez, the most competent professional I've ever met. She speaks 6 languages fluently, holds a master's degree from one of the top universities in the country, and just saved my company from a major international legal disaster." The whole restaurant was listening now. "And you two," he leaned slightly forward, "are being rude and prejudiced. If you can't behave properly in public, maybe you should have dinner at home." The women mumbled apologies and asked for the check, clearly mortified. Alexander returned to his table where Elena was watching him with an unreadable expression. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "Of course I did. They were being awful." "Alexander, I can stand up for myself. I know you can, but no one deserves to be treated that way." The rest of dinner passed in relative silence. Elena seemed lost in thought, and Alexander wasn't sure if he had done the right thing or made everything worse. When they left the restaurant, The Manhattan night air was cool and pleasant. They walked a few steps in silence until Elena stopped under a streetlight. "Thank you," she said, finally looking him in the eye, "for standing up for me in there." "You're welcome." They were out of line. "It's just, I'm not used to that." "Used to what?" "To someone being on my side." There was something vulnerable in her voice that made Alexander's heart race. She was standing there under the yellow glow of the lamp, beautiful and strong and a little lost, and he couldn't think of anything but what it would be like to kiss her. So he did exactly that. Without warning, without asking, Alexander leaned in and pressed his lips to hers. For one glorious moment, Helena didn't pull away. For a moment, she kissed him back. Then reality hit like a splash of cold water, which in this case was a solid slap across the face. The sound echoed down the empty street. Alexander raised his hand to his cheek, stunned as Elena stared at him in fury. "What do you think you're doing?" I thought, what? That because you stood up to two drunk snakes you earned the right to kiss me? No. I felt like. Elena laughed without humor. "Alexander, I'm not a prize you get for good behavior." She stepped away, looking for a cab. "Elena, wait. I didn't mean—" "Good night, Alexander," she said, getting into the first cab that stopped. "Thanks for dinner, and for the reality check." And she was gone, leaving Alexander alone on the sidewalk, his face stinging and his pride in pieces. For the first time in his life, the billionaire CEO had been turned down, and strangely enough, that only made him want Elena Ramirez even more. Monday arrived with the weight of an elephant sitting on Alexander's chest. The slap still echoed in his mind. But worse than the humiliation was the certainty that he had ruined everything with Elena. When he got to the office, he expected to find her with that usual icy look, but at least expected to find her. The translation desk was empty. "Harrison," he shouted, making half the office jump. "Where's Elena, sir? She didn't come in today, and she didn't call either." Alexander frowned. Elena wasn't the kind of person to miss work without notice. In fact, Elena wasn't the kind to miss work, period. That's when Michael showed up, wearing that corporate smile that usually meant bad news dressed up as good. "Alexander, I need to talk to you. It's about our temporary consultant, Elena." "Exactly. Come on, let's talk in my office." In Michael's office, 3 other directors were already waiting. Victoria from translation, Lucas from international relations, and Edwards from finance. All of them looked like they were at a funeral. "Alexander," Michael began adjusting his tie nervously, "we need to talk about a delicate situation." "What situation?" "It's about Elena Ramirez. We feel she's, how can I put this, getting too bold." Alexander blinked, confused. "Too bold." Victoria cut in, clearly annoyed. "She keeps questioning our work. The translators feel uncomfortable. She acts like she owns the company." "She's just doing her job," Alexander replied, his voice beginning to harden. "But with what attitude?" Lucas snapped. "The other day she corrected my report in front of clients, made me look like a fool. Maybe because your report was wrong." Edwards, always the most direct, got straight to the point. "Alexander, she doesn't fit in here. That much is clear. You saw what happened at the restaurant last week. People are talking." "What people?" "Everyone." Michael waved his hands dramatically. "The cleaning lady turned into a consultant overnight. That kind of thing gets people talking." Alexander felt his blood start to boil. "What kind of talk?" Victoria lowered her voice as if she were about to reveal a state secret. "Well, some clients have been asking if if the two of you have a personal relationship, and that's your business because it affects the company's image." Edwards slammed his fist on the table. "Alexander, be reasonable. She's not from our class. She doesn't understand how things work around here." "Our class," Alexander repeated, stunned. Michael tried to smooth things over. "What Edwards means is that Elena comes from a different background. She doesn't know the social codes of our corporate world." "Social codes?" Alexander laughed. But there was no joy in it. "You mean she doesn't nod along when you say nonsense?" "What we mean," Lucas jumped in, "is that she needs to go quietly. We can make up a reason, offer compensation." "You already fired her." Awkward silence. "You already fired her?" Alexander shouted. Michael swallowed hard. "Technically, we asked her not to come in anymore temporarily." Alexander stood up so suddenly his chair almost fell over. You did what? Alexander, please be reasonable. Reasonable, he laughed, but this time, his voice was full of anger, and everyone stepped back. Elena Ramirez saved a multi-million-dollar inheritance for this company. She corrected contracts that could have cost us a fortune. She's the most competent professional to ever walk into this office. But she's just a cleaning lady, Victoria burst out. The silence that followed was deafening. Say that again, Alexander said, his voice dangerously quiet. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. And you know what that says about you? That you're small-minded, petty, and prejudiced. Edwards tried to take control of the meeting again. Alexander, think about the company. Think about the shareholders. A cleaning lady suddenly becoming a consultant. It doesn't look professional. You know what doesn't look professional? Alexander said, walking to the window with his back to them. Executives who feel threatened by a woman who's smarter than all of them combined. Just then, Harrison appeared at the door, clearly nervous. Sir, sorry to interrupt, but Elena Ramirez is here. She'd like to speak with you. Send her in. Elena walked through the door, and Alexander immediately noticed something was different. She was carrying a small box with her belongings and had that determined expression he was starting to fear. Alexander, she said, ignoring everyone else. I came to say goodbye. Elena, about yesterday. This isn't about yesterday. It's about today. She set the box down. I got a very interesting call this morning. Michael cleared his throat nervously. Elena, we can explain. She looked at him with a stare that could freeze fire. Explain that you decided I don't fit in here, that I'm not suited for your fancy corporate environment. It wasn't personal. Of course, it was personal. Elena laughed. But there was no warmth in it. You just can't stand the idea that a former cleaning lady is more competent than you. Alexander stepped forward. Elena, I didn't know. They acted behind my back. Alexander? She cut him off, raising her hand. Stop. But I can fix this. I can. I don't want you to fix it. Her voice was steady, but Alexander sensed the pain beneath her strength. I don't want your protection. But Elena... No, she burst out. You don't get it, do you? I don't want your pity. I'm not anyone's charity project. All I want is my dignity. The silence in the room was heavy. You have your dignity, Alexander said softly. Elena looked at him. Her eyes filled with tears she hadn't let fall. Do I? Then why does it feel like I lost it the moment I agreed to work here? She picked up the box and headed for the door. Elena, wait. Goodbye, Alexander. It's been educational. And she left, leaving the room in complete silence. Alexander didn't hesitate. He grabbed his car keys and ran after her, ignoring Michael's calls. He found her in the lobby, waiting for the elevator. Elena. Go away, Alexander. Let me drive you home. I don't need that. Please. It's the least I can do. She looked at him for a long moment. All right, but only because I don't feel like paying for a cab. The drive to Brooklyn was tense and quiet. Alexander had never been to that part of the city before. The streets gradually became simpler, the buildings older, the people more diverse. When they stopped in front of a small brick house, he finally understood. This was Elena's real life. No luxury, no glamour. Just a woman doing her best to raise a child on her own. Thanks for the ride, she said as she got out of the car. Elena, Alexander. She leaned down to speak through the open window. You've proven you're a good man, but we live in different worlds. This is for the best. And she went inside, leaving Alexander sitting in the car, finally realizing he had lost much more than just an employee. He had lost the most extraordinary person he had ever met. Alexander spent 2 days driving around Brooklyn like a lost tourist. He didn't have the courage to knock on Elena's door, but he also couldn't stop thinking about her. On the 3rd day, he decided to take a more creative approach. He hired Harrison to conduct some market research in the neighborhood, which really meant find out everything about Elena's life without looking like a complete stalker. Sir, Harrison reported, clearly uncomfortable. I found out a few things about her son. Go on. Liam, 7 years old. He attends a local public school but needs special therapy that costs a fortune. Elena works 3 different jobs to pay for it all. 3 jobs: online, freelance translation, night cleaning in offices, and weekends at a laundromat. The boy takes expensive medication and needs a therapist who specializes in autism. Alexander felt that tightness in his chest again. Elena was working herself to exhaustion while he wasted money in pretentious French restaurants. On Thursday, he showed up at her door at 6. 0 inches the evening, carrying a folder of documents and his most professional smile. Elena opened the door and looked at him like someone facing a vacuum cleaner salesman. "What do you want, Alexander?" "I'm here to make a business proposal." "Not interested." "You haven't even heard it yet." "I don't need to hear it to know I'll say no." From inside the house, a child's voice called out, "Mom, who is it?" "No one important, sweetheart," Elena replied, but left the door slightly open. Alexander took the opportunity. "Elena, I want to pay for Liam's education and his medical treatments, all of it." The door slammed in his face. He knocked again. "Elena, go away. Just give me 2 minutes." The door flew open. 2 minutes. I'm timing you." "Thank you. Look, I know you're working 3 jobs. Who told you that? Doesn't matter. What matters is you shouldn't have to work yourself to the bone. Your son needs proper care. And you think you can fix all my problems with money? I can try." Elena laughed. But it wasn't a happy sound. "Alexander, you still don't get it. I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's an investment in you, in Liam. It's pity, and I don't accept pity from anyone." "Then take a job." That made her pause. "What do you mean?" "I want to hire you as my personal translator officially. Full salary, benefits, health insurance. Alexander, think about Liam. He deserves the best treatment." For a moment, Elena hesitated. Alexander saw the inner conflict in her eyes. "What kind of work? International translations, contracts, official correspondence, things you can do in your sleep, and the other executives, they'll love seeing me back. The other executives can deal with it. I'm the CEO." Elena studied his face for a long moment. "Full salary, not disguised charity. Full salary. You'll work harder than anyone else. And if it doesn't work out, it will. Trust me." She let out a deep sigh. "Fine, but on my terms, which are first, no special favors. Second, if anyone treats me like charity, I'm gone. Third, I do my job, you do yours, and we keep our distance." "Distance? You heard me." The following Monday, Elena returned to Thompson, Worldwide, as Alexander's official translator. The reception was interesting. Michael made a point to greet her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Elena, what a surprise. Back so soon?" "Hi, Michael. Looks like you'll have to put up with me a little longer." Victoria and Lucas exchanged knowing glances as she walked by. The gossip started before she even sat down. "I heard she came back as Alexander's special assistant," whispered a secretary. "Special assistant?" Another one giggled softly. What an interesting choice of words. Elena ignored it all and focused on work. Alexander had given her a stack of international contracts that needed urgent review. That's when Victoria decided to stir things up. "Elena, dear," she said, appearing beside her desk, "I hope you understand that here we maintain certain standards." "Standards?" Elena looked up. "Yes, after all, we work with very demanding clients. They expect, how can I say, professionals with a certain pedigree." "Pedigree," Elena repeated, smiling dangerously. "Victoria, are you confusing me with a dog?" Lucas joined the conversation, clearly enjoying the moment. "What Victoria means is that our clients are used to a certain level of sophistication." "I see." Elena nodded. "And you think I'm not sophisticated enough?" "Well," Victoria hesitated. "How about we test that?" Elena stood up. "I heard you're having trouble with the contract from the German company. Something about legal terms being mistranslated." Lucas's face turned red. "They're not problems, just minor adjustments. Can I take a look?" "That won't be necessary." "Of course it is." Alexander appeared out of nowhere. "Elena, the contract is on my desk. The German client is threatening to cancel everything because of misunderstandings in the translation." 15 minutes later, Elena returned with the document full of red pen marks. She handed it to Lucas in front of everyone. "I found 17 serious mistakes. You translated Haftung as responsibility, when it should be legal liability. That difference could cost millions in court. You also confused Gewährleistung with guarantee. Those are completely different concepts under German law. And here," she pointed to another section, You wrote that the company may do something when it should be must. Victoria tried to defend herself. Those are just technical details. Details that almost cost a $50 million contract, Elena replied. But hey, at least you've got pedigree, right? The silence was awkward. Alexander had to hold back a laugh. Elena, can you correct everything and resend it to the client? Sure, I'll have it ready in 2 hours. And she walked out, leaving Victoria and Lucas looking like they'd just been run over by a truck driven by a former cleaning lady. At 3:00 the afternoon, Elena's phone rang. She answered with her usual efficiency. Elena Ramirez. Mom. The voice on the other end was weak, scared. Liam, why are you calling from school? Mom, I don't feel well. I'm seeing weird things and my head really hurts. Elena felt her world stop. Liam, sweetheart, stay calm. Mommy's on her way. She hung up and ran to Alexander's office. He was in an important meeting with Japanese investors. Alexander, she burst through the door. I need to go now. He saw the panic in her eyes and didn't hesitate. Harrison, cancel everything, he shouted, standing up. Elena, let's go. You don't have to. Can you just stop being stubborn for 1 minute? Elena looked at him surprised, but deep down she knew he was right. On the way to the school, Elena explained about Liam's occasional episodes. Alexander drove like an ambulance driver, completely ignoring traffic rules. They found Liam in the nurse's office, pale and confused. Elena held him while Alexander spoke with the nurse. Nearest children's hospital? He asked. 15 minutes from here. But let's go, he said, lifting Liam into his arms. At the hospital, while Elena filled out paperwork and Liam was being examined, Alexander realized something important. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not in a meeting with investors, not closing million-dollar deals, but right here, helping the woman who had changed his life and the boy she loved more than anything. And for the first time, that felt more important than any business. The hospital waiting room had that familiar smell of disinfectant mixed with anxiety. Alexander sat beside Elena for 2 hours, watching her nervously wring her hands as they waited for news about Liam. He's going to be okay, he said for the 10th time, trying to sound reassuring. Elena nodded without really hearing him, eyes fixed on the door where the doctor had taken her son. Then the silence became unbearable, and she started talking. You know what's funny? She said, still watching the door. 5 years ago, I had a premium health plan. Private clinics, top-of-the-line tests. Liam would never have to come to a public hospital. Alexander watched her, realizing she was about to open a door she had kept locked for a long time. What happened 5 years ago? Elena laughed, but it was a bitter sound. I learned that honesty can be very expensive. What do you mean? She finally looked at him and Alexander saw a deep pain in her eyes. I used to work at Westbridge Global, know it? The consulting firm that collapsed in a corruption scandal. That's the one. I was their official translator, director of international communications. Actually, I earned 6 times more than any college professor could dream of. Alexander leaned in interested. And you left because I found out that half the contracts I translated were used to launder money for African dictators. Elena ran a hand through her hair, exhausted. Fake documents, shell companies, bribes disguised as consulting fees. I had been translating international crimes for years without knowing it. My God. When I found out, I went straight to the FBI. I turned in everything. Contracts, emails, meeting recordings. I thought I was doing the right thing. You were. Elena laughed again, but this time with more sadness. Alexander, you're still too naive for a billionaire. Do you know what happened when the investigation started? The top people at Westbridge needed a scapegoat. They blamed you? Worse, they made up fake evidence saying I was the mastermind behind it all, the corrupt translator who altered documents to help the schemes. Alexander felt a deep anger rising in his chest. That's ridiculous. You were the one reporting it. Try explaining that to the media. Elena shrugged. They had better lawyers, more powerful contacts, and I was just an inconvenient employee who knew too much. But you had proof. I did, until it all disappeared mysteriously from the FBI system, until my lawyer decided he couldn't represent me anymore, until they started following me and threatening me. They threatened you? Elena nodded, her voice getting softer. Anonymous calls in the middle of the night. Strange cars parked in front of my house. One time my home address showed up on shady websites. I was 8 months pregnant. Alexander, alone and terrified. And Liam's father, he ran off when the scandal broke, decided he didn't want to be associated with an international criminal. She made air quotes with irony. He got an irresistible job offer in another state and vanished. Alexander was speechless. The brave woman he'd met was the result of a nightmare he couldn't even imagine. Why didn't you ever tell me this before? Because who would believe it? A cleaning lady claiming she used to be an executive. Please. Elena sighed. Besides, I prefer when people judge me for who I am now, not what happened to me. Elena, no. She cut him off. I don't want your pity. I survived. I learned how to be invisible, to take whatever work I could find to protect my son. And you know what? I'm stronger now. Alexander wanted to say something, anything. But at that moment, the doctor walked in with Liam, sleepy but smiling. The crisis had passed. It was just an allergic reaction to a new medication. 3 days later, Alexander was reviewing contracts when Harrison burst into his office looking pale as a ghost. Sir, we have a problem. A very big one. What is it now? Harrison turned on the TV to the news channel. The headline on the screen made Alexander's blood run cold. Fraudulent translator from Westbridge Global now works for Billionaire CEO. What the hell is this? Alexander muttered. The reporter continued. Elena Ramirez, former employee of the controversial Westbridge Global, was recently hired by CEO Alexander Thompson of Thompson Worldwide. Leaked documents suggest Ramirez was involved in the corruption schemes that led to Westbridge's collapse. Alexander turned off the TV and ran to Elena's desk. She was sitting still, staring at her screen with a mix of exhaustion and inevitability. I saw it, she said simply. They found me. Who leaked this? I don't know. Probably someone from the company. Someone who didn't like me coming back. Alexander felt his anger explode. I'll find out who it was and what? Elena turned to him. Sue them. Threaten them. Alexander, these people have resources you can't even imagine. I'm not going to let them destroy you again. You don't have a choice. Elena began gathering her things. I need to leave before this hurts your company. No, you're not running away again. I'm not running. I'm being practical. She stopped and looked at him. Alexander, you saw what happened to me 5 years ago. Do you really think I'll drag you and your company into this? I don't care. But I do, she snapped. You have employees, shareholders, responsibilities. I won't let everything fall apart because of me. At that moment, Michael appeared at the door, clearly stressed. Alexander, we need to talk right now. Not now, Michael. It's about the shareholders. They're furious. They're demanding an emergency meeting. Elena picked up her bag and headed for the exit. Where are you going? Alexander shouted. Home. To take care of my son and hope you can contain the damage. Elena, wait. But she was already gone, leaving Alexander in the middle of a storm he never saw coming. That night, social media exploded. Elena the fraud trended. Old photos of her at Westbridge were mysteriously leaked. Conspiracy theories started spreading. And somewhere out there, very powerful people smiled, satisfied they had silenced Elena Ramirez once again. But this time, she wasn't alone. This time, Alexander Thompson was on her side, and he was just getting started. The morning after the scandal, Alexander arrived at the office and was met with a scene straight out of a disaster movie. Reporters camped outside the building, employees whispering in the hallways like conspirators, and Harrison running back and forth like a hamster on a wheel. Sir, Harrison gasped when he saw him, the phone hasn't stopped ringing. Angry shareholders, journalists asking for interviews, and the board of directors called an emergency meeting for 9. Alexander looked at his watch. 8:50. Great. I love starting the day with a public execution. In the boardroom, the atmosphere was tighter than a crane cable. All 8 board members were present, each with an expression somewhere between concern and full-blown panic. Richard Ellis, chairman of the board, and a man who seemed carved from ice, got straight to the point. Alexander, we're facing an unprecedented image crisis. Our stock dropped 12% since yesterday. Good morning to you too, Richard. This is no time for sarcasm, snapped Patricia Reed, head of public relations. Clients are canceling contracts, investors are asking tough questions, and the media is treating our company like a criminal organization. Alexander sat down calmly. So, what's the solution you're all proposing? Michael, who was trying to disappear into his chair, cleared his throat nervously. Well, the obvious solution is simple. Spit it out, Michael. Fire Elena Ramirez publicly with an official statement saying we uncovered her controversial past and took appropriate action. The silence that followed was so deep you could hear a pin drop or Michael's dignity hitting the floor. No, Alexander said plainly. What do you mean, no? Richard frowned. And oh, no. Elena Ramirez is innocent. She was made a scapegoat 5 years ago, and I won't let it happen again. Patricia threw her hands in the air dramatically. Alexander, be reasonable. The company's reputation is on the line. Our reputation. Alexander laughed. Patricia, our reputation should be built on competence and integrity, not on sacrificing innocent employees to satisfy sensationalist media. Edwards, always the blunt one, slammed his fist on the table. Alexander, you're being too sentimental. Elena Ramirez is a problem that needs to be removed. Removed? Alexander stood up slowly. Edwards, you're talking about a person, not a spreadsheet. A person who's costing this company millions. A person who saved millions for this company. Alexander shouted. Have you already forgotten the Basque document? The German contract? She corrected. Elena Ramirez has done more for this company in a month than some of you have in years. Richard tried to regain control. Alexander, we understand your loyalty, but we have to think about the greater good. The greater good? The greater good would be having more employees like Elena, not fewer. Michael made one last desperate attempt. Alexander, think about the shareholders. Think about the employees. Everyone's on edge. You know who should be on edge. Alexander walked to the window, turning his back to them. The people who leaked a private employee's information to the media, they are the ones who should be worried. The discomfort was obvious. A few board members exchanged guilty looks. You're not suggesting that someone here, Patricia began. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating it. Alexander turned to face them all. Someone in this room, or very close to this room, leaked the information about Elena. And when I find out who it was, that person is going to learn the real meaning of the word fired. At that moment, Harrison appeared at the door, more nervous than ever. Sir, sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation downstairs. What kind of situation? A press conference, an impromptu one. The reporters are demanding an official statement about Elena Ramirez. Richard stood up. Perfect. Alexander, this is your chance to clear things up. Go down there, announce her dismissal, and I'll go down. Yes. Alexander cut him off, but not to fire anyone. And he walked out, leaving 8 stunned people behind. In the building's lobby, at least 20 reporters were waiting with cameras and microphones. Alexander came down the stairs like a gladiator entering the arena. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, he began, his voice echoing through the lobby. You want a statement about Elena Ramirez? Here it is. Elena Ramirez is the most competent, most honest, and most intelligent professional this company has ever had. The murmurs began instantly. She was the victim of a corruption scheme at Westbridge Global, not the perpetrator. She's the one who reported the crimes, not the one who committed them, and anyone suggesting otherwise is spreading lies. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Thompson, what about the investors' crisis of confidence? Investors who care more about media gossip than real results might want to rethink their priorities. Another journalist called out, What if the board demands her dismissal? Alexander smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. The board can demand whatever it wants. I'm the CEO of this company, and I make decisions based on competence, not political pressure. And if they threaten your position, then let them. Alexander looked directly into the cameras. Elena Ramirez is still employed at Thomson Worldwide because she deserves to be, and anyone who doesn't like that is free to leave. The press conference was being streamed live into the boardroom. Richard Ellis watched with an expression that looked like he was having an ulcer in real time. He's completely lost it, Patricia muttered. He needs to be stopped, Edwards agreed. Richard picked up the phone and made a quick call. 5 minutes later, he hung up with a grim expression. Gentlemen, I just spoke with our major shareholders. They all agree. Alexander Thompson must be temporarily removed from his position as CEO until this crisis is resolved. Can we really do that? Michael asked. We can and we will. Emergency board meeting now. Meanwhile, Elena was watching the press conference from her home in Brooklyn with Liam playing on the floor beside her. Every word from Alexander made her heart tighten. He was risking everything for her, his company, his position, his reputation, and she couldn't let that happen. She picked up the phone and called Harrison. "Harrison, it's Elena. I need to speak to Alexander right away." "Ma'am, he's in a meeting with the board." "Then give him a message. Tell him I'm resigning officially in a written letter." "But, ma'am..." "Just give him the message, Harrison." She hung up, heartbroken, but determined to protect the man who had stood up for her. An hour later, Alexander walked out of the boardroom with a look of disbelief and anger. Harrison was waiting with an envelope. "Sir, Elena Ramirez left this for you." Alexander opened the letter with trembling hands. The words burned on the page. "Alexander, thank you for standing up for me, but I can't let you ruin your life because of me. I'm resigning to protect you and your company. Please don't try to find me, Elena." Just then, Harrison whispered, "Sir, one more thing. The board voted. You've been temporarily suspended as CEO." Alexander crushed the letter in his hands. In one afternoon, he had lost both his company and the woman he loved, and for the first time in his life, he had no idea how to fix it. Elena was making breakfast for Liam when the doorbell rang. It was 7 inches the morning on a Tuesday, and she wasn't expecting visitors, much less 2 federal agents holding an official envelope. "Elena Ramirez?" asked the taller agent who looked like he'd stepped out of an action movie. "Depends on who's asking," she replied, holding the door halfway open. "FBI, ma'am. You're being summoned to testify in the international investigation into Westbridge Global." Elena almost dropped her coffee cup. "Investigation? I thought the case was closed." "It was reopened 3 months ago. New evidence came to light. You're required to appear at the federal court in Manhattan next Monday at 9 a.m. Liam appeared in the kitchen, still in his pajamas. "Mom? Who are those men?" "No one important, sweetheart," Elena said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Go back to your room, please." After the agents left, Elena stood staring at the subpoena as if it were a venomous snake. 5 years later, the past had come back to haunt her. Alexander, meanwhile, was in his apartment eating cereal straight from the box, something his CEO self would have found unthinkable. It had been a week since his suspension, and he felt completely lost. The phone rang. It was Harrison. "Sir, I saw it on the news. Elena's been summoned to testify in the Westbridge investigation." "What?" Alexander nearly choked on the cereal. "It's going to be broadcast live Monday at 9. "Sir, maybe this is her chance to clear her name, or to be destroyed for good," Alexander murmured. On Sunday night, Elena was in her room organizing documents she had carefully stored for 5 years. Shoeboxes full of printed emails, hidden flash drives, secretly recorded conversations. Everything she had managed to save before her life fell apart. Liam showed up at the door. "Mom, why are you looking through that old stuff? Remember when I taught you about telling the truth?" "Yes. Tomorrow I'm going to tell a very important truth to some very important people." "And is everything going to be okay?" Elena hugged her son. "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." On Monday morning, the federal court in Manhattan was packed. Journalists, lawyers, curious onlookers. Everyone wanted to see the testimony of the woman who had been painted as the villain of Westbridge Global. Elena walked into the courtroom wearing a simple black suit, carrying a worn brown folder. She looked small compared to the scale of the event, but her eyes shone with a determination that made some people shift uncomfortably in their seats. The prosecutor, a bald man named Thomas Riley, began the questioning. "Miss Ramirez, did you work as a translator at Westbridge Global?" "I worked as Director of International Communications," Elena corrected him. "Translation was just one of my responsibilities." "And for how long?" 4 years. From 2018 to 2022. "At any point did you suspect that you were translating documents related to illegal activities?" Elena took a deep breath. "At first, no. The documents looked like regular business contracts, consultations, partnerships, investments. It was only in 2021 that I started noticing strange patterns." "What kind of patterns?" "Contracts with ridiculously high amounts for vague services, companies that only existed on paper, money being transferred to tax havens without any clear reason." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The prosecutor went on. "And what did you do when you discovered this?" "I started saving copies of the documents. I secretly recorded meetings. I put a flash drive in my computer and saved everything I could." "Why?" Because I knew that if I got caught, they'd try to silence me, and I needed proof. Across town, Alexander was glued to the TV, hanging on every word. Harrison had shown up with donuts and coffee, turning it into some kind of strange sports event. "She's doing well," Harrison said. "For now," Alexander muttered, biting his nails. In the courtroom, the prosecutor pulled out a thick folder. "Miss Ramirez, do you recognize these documents?" Elena looked and nodded. "They're internal Westbridge emails. I saved them before I was fired." "Can you read this one in particular?" Elena took the document and read it aloud. "Elena is asking too many questions. We need to find a way to neutralize her before she finds out about Zimbabwe." Gasps echoed throughout the courtroom. "And this one? The plan is simple. We'll put all the blame on the translator. She signed everything, has access to everything, and she's just an employee. Perfect scapegoat." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. The prosecutor continued. "Miss Ramirez, do you have more evidence?" Elena opened her worn folder and pulled out a flash drive. "I have recordings of meetings where the directors discussed how to frame me. I have emails detailing the money laundering scheme. And I have this." She pulled out a sheet of paper, a signed confession from Ambassador Rafael Ortega, admitting that I was used as a scapegoat. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Lawyers whispered furiously. Journalists typed frantically. "How did you get that confession?" "Ambassador Ortega came to me 2 years ago. He had terminal cancer and wanted to clear his conscience. He confessed everything and signed this statement in front of 2 witnesses. On Alexander's TV, the cameras showed Elena's face, calm and determined. Tears ran down his cheeks. "She did it," he whispered. "She really did it." Harrison was stunned. "Sir, she kept everything for 5 years. She saved all the proof." In the courtroom, the prosecutor asked the final question. "Miss Ramirez, why didn't you present this evidence earlier?" Elena looked straight into the cameras. "Because they tried to silence me with threats. Because they destroyed my career and my reputation. Because they made me believe no one would believe me." Her voice grew stronger. "But most of all, because I had a small child to protect, and I was on my own." "And what changed?" Elena smiled for the first time during her testimony. "I met people who believed in me. People who taught me that the truth is always worth it, no matter how long it takes to come out." When the testimony ended, Elena left the courthouse under a storm of camera flashes and reporters' questions. But this time, the questions were different. "Elena, how does it feel to prove your innocence? Will you sue Westbridge for damages? What are your plans now?" She stopped on the courthouse steps and said, "Only now I'm going home to hug my son and watch cartoons because after 5 years I can finally sleep in peace." In his apartment, Alexander turned off the TV and sat in silence for a long time. Elena had done it on her own without anyone's help. She had proven she was exactly who he always knew she was, the most extraordinary woman he had ever met, and he had lost her because he'd been too much of a coward to stand by her when it mattered most. But maybe there was still a chance to make things right. He grabbed his car keys. It was time to go to Brooklyn. 48 hours after the testimony that shook the corporate world, Elena woke up to Liam jumping on her bed, shouting, "Mom, you're on TV again." She rubbed her eyes and looked at the television Liam had turned on. The morning news anchor smiled as she said, "Elena Ramirez, the brave whistleblower who exposed the Westbridge global scheme, has received public apologies from several organizations that had wrongly condemned her 5 years ago." "Liam, turn the volume down," she muttered, trying to process that her life had been turned upside down again, this time for the better. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Job offers, interview requests, publishers wanting to release her biography. It felt surreal. The most surprising call came at 10 a.m. "Elena Ramirez." A formal voice said, "Yes, this is Patricia Reed, Director of Public Relations at Thomson Worldwide. Mr. Thompson would like to speak with you." Elena nearly dropped the phone. Alexander was reinstated last night. Emergency board meeting. It was unanimous. Across town, Alexander was in his office, trying not to look too nervous. When Elena showed up at the door an hour later, he stood so quickly he knocked over his coffee cup. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi," he replied, trying to wipe the coffee with napkins. "Sorry about the mess, still getting used to being CEO again." Elena laughed. "How does it feel to be the boss again?" Like nothing's changed, except now everyone looks at me like I'm a hero for standing up for you. And you don't like being the hero? I'd rather have been smart enough to stop things from going that far. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past few weeks hanging between them. Elena, Alexander finally said, I came to offer you a job. Another job? She raised an eyebrow. Alexander, I've kind of become famous. I'm getting offers from everywhere. I know. I read about the UN proposal and the one from the BBC and that publisher who wants to print your life story. Have you been stalking me again? No, he rushed to say. I mean, not on purpose. You're all over the news. Elena sat down, amused. So, what's your offer? Alexander took a deep breath. Director of International Relations at Thomson Worldwide. Salary 6 times what it was before. Your own office, your own assistant, and full authority over all international contracts. Wow, Elena pretended to be impressed. And who would I report to? Directly to me. Interesting. Elena tilted her head. And what would our work dynamic be like? Alexander swallowed hard, realizing he was in tricky territory. Professional? Completely professional. Good, because I accept the offer. Alexander's face lit up. Really? Really? But with a few conditions. What conditions? He asked, a little nervous. Elena pulled a sheet of paper from her bag. I wrote up a contract, very specific. Alexander took the paper and began to read. His eyebrows slowly rose as he went. Clause 1. No physical affection in the workplace, he read aloud. Keep going. Clause 2. No dinners that could be seen as romantic. Elena, this necessary. Keep reading. Clause 3. Mr. Thomson may not use his position to impress the employee with grand gestures. He looked at her. Grand gestures like sending flowers to my desk or booking out entire restaurants. You get the idea. And Clause 4, Alexander continued reading. No kissing at work no matter the emotional situation. Especially that one. Alexander put the paper down. Elena, this is kind of extreme, don't you think? Extreme? She laughed. Alexander, we have a history. You kissed me and I slapped you. I'd rather avoid awkward situations. But what if? What if? What? What if I want to kiss you? Elena looked at him with that sharp expression he had learned to fear and love at the same time. Then you'll have to wait until we're out of the office. Alexander's heart raced. Does that mean you might consider outside the office? Maybe if you behave like a decent boss. Define decent boss. No special treatment, no overprotection, and definitely no using your position to impress me. Alexander smiled. And if I still want to impress you, then you'll have to be creative. No money or power allowed. Challenge accepted, he said, signing the makeshift contract. When do you start? Now. What's my first task? Alexander stood and walked over to the window, looking out at the city stretching below them. We have an international conference in Paris next week. Representatives from 15 countries, million-dollar contracts, complex negotiations. Sounds interesting. I need the best translator in the world to go with me. Elena smiled. Know anyone like that? I know one who recently proved she can take down international corruption schemes. I think she can handle it. Would this translator be willing to travel with her boss? Depends. Will the boss behave? Elena pretended to think. He can try, but I can't promise he'll manage. Why not? Because Paris is romantic, and even the best-behaved bosses can lose control. Alexander moved closer, stopping at a respectful distance. And if he does lose control, then we'll have to renegotiate the contract. Would you be open to renegotiation? Elena stood and walked to the door. Alexander, she said, turning to him with a smile that nearly stopped his heart. When it comes to you, I'm always open to surprises. And she left, leaving him standing there, smiling like a lovesick teenager. Harrison showed up at the door 5 minutes later. Sir, do I need to arrange tickets to Paris? 2 tickets, Alexander said, still smiling. To Paris. I have a feeling this trip is going to be interesting. Harrison, Alexander laughed. You have no idea. Paris was waiting for them, and with it the chance to find out whether 2 completely different worlds could finally meet without either of them losing who they were. The billionaire CEO and the former cleaning lady who had become the most admired woman in the corporate world. What could possibly go wrong with that combination? Paris in October was exactly like in the romantic movies Elena pretended not to watch. Golden leaves, crisp air, and a charm that made even the most skeptical believe in happy endings. Alexander and Elena arrived at the Hotel Plaza Athénée the night before the conference, keeping a professional distance that fooled everyone except themselves. Separate rooms, Elena reminded him at the front desk when Alexander picked up the keys. "Of course," he replied. "Signed contract, remember? Good, because if you had booked a romantic suite, I'd be on the next flight back to New York." The French receptionist watched their exchange with barely hidden amusement. "Monsieur Thompson," he said with a thick accent, "the presidential suite is ready for you and the deluxe room for Mademoiselle Ramirez." "Perfect." Elena nodded. "Ah, but of course," the receptionist added with a sly smile, "the ladies' room has a view of the Eiffel Tower." "A coincidence, yes." Elena looked at Alexander with suspicion. "Coincidence? Total coincidence," he said, trying to look innocent and failing miserably. On the morning of the conference, Elena appeared in the lobby, wearing a navy blue suit that made her look like she'd walked out of a business magazine. Alexander, who was speaking with Japanese delegates, nearly forgot how to breathe when he saw her. "Good morning, boss," she greeted him formally. "Good morning, Director Ramirez," he replied, doing his best to stay professional. "The Japanese delegate, Mr. Sato," smiled politely. "Is this the famous Elena Ramirez, the woman who exposed international corruption?" "That's me," Elena answered in fluent Japanese, almost making Sato fall over in surprise. "She speaks Japanese, too," Alexander whispered to the delegate. "And French, German, Italian, Spanish, and Basque." "Basque?" Sato asked, impressed. "Long story. It involves a stubborn CEO and $150,000 bet." During the conference, Elena was simply outstanding. She translated simultaneously into 5 languages, mediated complex negotiations, and smoothed over cultural misunderstandings with the grace of a born diplomat. Alexander watched her work and felt proud in a way he hadn't known was possible. During the lunch break, they walked through the gardens of the Palais des Congrès. "You're shining in there," Alexander said. "Thank you. It feels good to be doing what I love again." "And what is it you love?" "Building bridges. Helping people understand each other." Elena looked at him. "And you? Are you enjoying being the boss again?" "I'm enjoying working with you." "Careful, Thompson. That's starting to sound dangerously like favoritism." "It's not favoritism when it's true." That evening, after the official dinner at the conference, some delegates organized a casual party on the hotel rooftop. There was live jazz music, a view of the Eiffel Tower all lit up, and French champagne that Elena insisted on paying for herself. "To stay independent," she explained when Alexander tried to pay. "You're impossible," he laughed. "You created this monster. I used to be just a humble cleaning lady." "You were never just a humble cleaning lady. I was just too blind to see it." The music changed to something slower, and couples started dancing. Alexander looked at Elena a bit unsure. "May I ask you to dance, or does that violate some clause?" Elena pretended to check an imaginary contract. "Dancing is a gray area technically allowed if kept at a proper level of formality." "And what would be proper?" "No holding too close, no whispering in my ear, and definitely no looking into my eyes like I'm the only woman in the world. That's going to be hard." "Why?" "Because you are the only woman in the world. To me." Elena felt her heart race but stayed composed. "That was very close to a romantic statement, Thompson." "Was it?" He held out his hand. "Good thing we're technically off the clock." They danced under the Parisian stars, keeping a distance that was both respectful and almost unbearable. Elena could feel the warmth of Alexander's hands, the scent of his cologne, the intensity in his eyes that he was trying to hide. "You know what's funny?" she said as they turned slowly. "What?" 6 months ago, if someone told me I'd be dancing in Paris with the CEO who humiliated me, I would have called the police. And now I think that slap was the best thing I ever did. Why? Because it taught you respect. And it taught me I was worth more than I thought." The music stopped, but they stayed there in the middle of the dance floor looking at each other. "Elena," Alexander began. "No." She cut him off. "Don't say anything now. The moment is perfect. Don't ruin it." On the last day of the conference, Alexander had to give the closing speech. Elena was sitting in the front row with the other delegates when he stepped up to the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, This conference was a success because of the joint effort of extraordinary professionals. Polite applause. But I want to talk about something more personal, about how one person can completely change the way we see life. Elena frowned. This wasn't part of the script they had rehearsed. A few months ago, I met a woman who worked as a cleaning lady at my company. I was arrogant, prejudiced, and completely blind to the value of the people around me. Murmurs spread through the room. Elena realized where this was going and felt a wave of panic. This woman taught me that competence has nothing to do with social class, that dignity isn't something you can buy, and that real love happens when you meet someone who makes you want to be a better person. Alexander, Elena whispered, but he couldn't hear her. He said, looking directly at her, "You saved my company, my reputation, and my soul. You showed me that being vulnerable isn't weakness, it's courage." The room was completely silent. TV cameras zoomed in on Elena's red face. "And I know we agreed to keep everything professional. I know how much your independence means to you, but I can't pretend anymore that you're just my employee." Alexander stepped down from the stage and walked toward her. "Because you're not my employee. You're my partner, my equal, my best friend, and the woman I love more than anything in this world." Elena was frozen, watching the most powerful man she knew open up completely in front of hundreds of people. "And I know this might sound crazy," Alexander continued, kneeling in front of her, "but I want to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "Elena Ramirez, will you marry me?" The silence in the auditorium was overwhelming. Elena looked at the ring at Alexander on one knee, at the hundreds of people waiting for her answer. "Alexander Thompson," she finally said, tears in her eyes, "you just violated at least 5 clauses in our contract." He smiled nervously. "Is that a yes or a no?" Elena stood up, picked up the microphone that had fallen when he left the stage, and spoke to the entire room. "This is I'll think about it after you take me out to dinner. A real dinner. No contracts, no clauses, and definitely no audience." The auditorium burst into applause and laughter. "And Alexander," she added, leaning in to whisper in his ear, "next time you want to propose, give me a heads up. I like to be prepared for decisions that will change my whole life." He stood and hugged her, still mentally on one knee. "So, is that a maybe?" "It's a let's find out together." And that was exactly the answer he had hoped for. 6 months after the most public proposal in modern corporate history, Elena stood in the top-floor bathroom of Thompson Worldwide, staring at the mirror and trying not to panic. "Calm down, Elena," she murmured to her reflection. "You've stood up to arrogant billionaires, exposed international corruption schemes, and dealt with pushy reporters. A wedding should be easy." The door opened, and in came Isabella, her new best friend and former investigative reporter who had covered the Westbridge case. "The bride is talking to herself." Isabella laughed. "That's a bad sign." "I'm not talking to myself. I'm giving myself a motivational speech." "And how's that working out?" "Terribly. I'm still terrified." Isabella adjusted Elena's veil in the mirror. "Remember when you told me Alexander Thompson was an arrogant fool who didn't know the difference between respect and fear? I said that word for word during our first interview. And now I'm marrying that arrogant fool." Elena laughed. "What does that say about me?" "That you've got great taste in impossible men who can be reformed." Across the building, Alexander was in the office that had been turned into a groom's room, trying to fix his tie for the 10th time. Harrison stood nearby, offering unsolicited advice. "Sir, if I may suggest, maybe it's best not to mention the slap incident in your wedding vows." "Why would I mention the slap?" "Because you've brought it up in the last 5 versions of your speech." "Well, it was a big moment in our relationship, sir," Harrison sighed. "We usually avoid bringing up physical confrontations during weddings." Liam appeared at the door looking perfect in his little ring-bearer suit. "Alexander, Mom wants to know if you're still nervous." "I'm not nervous," Alexander lied. "Then why are you sweating?" "It's hot. We're in air conditioning." Harrison chuckled quietly. Liam had become the family's official lie detector. An hour later, the guests gathered on the rooftop terrace of Thompson Worldwide's 40th floor. The place had been transformed into a mix of enchanted garden and corporate elegance, a combination only Elena could have envisioned. Among the guests were delegates from the Paris conference, company staff, neighbors from Brooklyn, and surprisingly 3 former colleagues from Westbridge Global who had asked to speak with Elena. Victoria, the former head translator who had once looked down on her, approached with tears in her eyes. "Elena, I came to apologize for how I treated you, for the jealousy, for everything. Victoria. No, let me say it. When I saw you in court, when I heard the full story, I realized I was jealous because you were always better than the rest of us, and instead of admiring you, I tried to tear you down. Elena Ramirez, you're forgiven. We all make mistakes when we feel insecure. Lucas came next, just as remorseful. Elena, I was a complete fool. A prejudiced fool who felt intimidated by a woman smarter than he was. Lucas, you don't have to. Yes, I do. And I want you to know, I'm proud to know you truly. The ceremony began with Liam walking down the aisle, carrying the rings on a pillow he insisted on picking himself, shaped like a book. Because Mom loves words. When Elena appeared at the end of the aisle, the crowd fell completely silent. She wore a dress that was simple yet elegant, managing to be both sophisticated and accessible. Nothing flashy, nothing screaming, "Look at me." It was pure Elena. Alexander, standing at the altar, had to hold back tears. She looked beautiful, but more than that, she looked radiant, confident, whole. The officiant, a longtime family friend of the Thompsons, began the ceremony with a warm smile. We are gathered here today to celebrate the union of two people who have proven that opposites not only attract, but can also help each other grow. Opposites, Elena whispered to Alexander. We're not opposites. We're not. He whispered back. You're stubborn. I'm stubborn. You're a perfectionist. I'm a perfectionist. The only difference is I had more experience being humiliated. The officiant continued. Alexander, would you like to say your vows? Alexander took a deep breath and pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. Elena, when I met you, I thought I knew everything about leadership, success, and power. You taught me that real power is lifting up those around you, not bringing them down. Several people in the audience wiped away tears. You showed me that intelligence has nothing to do with social class, that dignity is not negotiable, and that true love is when someone challenges you to be better every day. And you gave me the greatest gift I could ask for, a family. You and Liam became my home. Elena was openly crying now. Elena, the officiant said, your vows. She wiped her tears and looked directly into Alexander's eyes. Alexander Thompson, you were the most annoying person I've ever met. Laughter echoed across the terrace. Arrogant, full of yourself, and completely out of touch with the real world. But you were also the one who gave me a second chance when no one else would. You taught me that we can keep our essence even when the world tries to push us down. That we can be vulnerable without being weak. And that sometimes the best stories start with a slap in the face. More laughter now, mixed with tears. I promise to love you, to challenge you, and occasionally give you a little smack on the head when your arrogance comes back. And I promise that our partnership will always be equal at work, at home, and in everything that comes our way. After exchanging rings, Alexander and Elena announced their first joint project, the Invisible Voices Foundation, created to support women who had been silenced or pushed aside in the corporate world. We want to create opportunities for people who have talent but no visibility, Elena explained to the guests, because everyone deserves a second chance. During the reception, Liam grabbed the DJ's microphone and made his own speech. Thank you, Alexander, for making my mom smile for real, and thank you for letting me choose the song for our first family dance. The song he picked, What a Wonderful World, by Louis Armstrong. As the three of them danced together, Alexander, Elena, and Liam, the guests watched moved. A family formed in the most unexpected way. When the party was winding down and the last guest said their goodbyes, Elena and Alexander were alone on the terrace looking out over the lights of New York City. So, he said, wrapping his arms around her, how does it feel to be Mrs. Thompson? I still prefer Elena Ramirez professionally, she replied, leaning against him. But Elena Thompson sounds nice for special occasions. And now, what's next? Elena turned in his arms. Now we live. We build our foundation, raise Liam, and see what other adventures are waiting for us. No more contracts with anti-romance clauses. Definitely no more contracts, but plenty of negotiation. You're still stubborn, and you're still impossible. The perfect match. Alexander kissed her gently as the city sparkled below them. Elena, he whispered against her lips. Thank you for saving me from myself. She smiled. That smile that had changed his life forever. Alexander, I never needed your pity. Just your respect. And now your love. And that's how the cleaning lady who became a director and the CEO who learned humility discovered that the best love stories begin with honesty, grow with mutual respect, and blossom when two people decide they're better together than apart. The king and queen of an empire built not just on money, but on dignity, justice, and true love. And if you think this sounds too much like a cliché, well, sometimes real life is better than fiction.